Hey guys, I'm Ted and I'm here to give you another lecture, and for this lecture we're going to wrap up our discussion on isolation and imperialism. Um, I'd like to jump right into things without doing our customary recap because our last lecture was so brief. Um, the turbulence of the 1850s really sort of halted American expansion. Had the sectional crises really sort of exploded and took on a life of their own. By 1859, the American Republic hadn't really expanded. The territories really weren't being that developed. And then, of course, with the outbreak of the Civil War, less than 2 years, less than 2 years after the explosion of sort of competing um, competing ideologies over the destiny of the territories that the United States had acquired. Um, in 1860, really sort of led to a hindrance, well, a momentary hindrance before expansion was once again ratcheted up to a new level. Um, Less than 2 years into the into Reconstruction, the United States acquired the massive Russian colony of Alaska. And it should be noted that Alaska was the first territorial possession acquired by the United States to be named a possession. It was not a territory in the treaty, it was a possession. And now the Republic had emerged from the Spanish War with formal overseas possessions, formal overseas colonies. Um, but it also emerged with an informal overseas empire as well, or informal overseas possessions. In the Caribbean and in Central America, happy to look at in a little bit. The informal overseas empire and possessions were deemed protectorates, and they included Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, Panama, and of course the Dominican Republic. Now, all were nominally independent, and the United States was just an ally, but in reality, the United States actually controlled the economics, foreign policy, and finances of these countries, and reserved the right to intervene militarily in any of them. Uh, the pattern was first established with Cuba, with the Platt Amendment. Now, the Cubans had to agree to this in order and add it to their constitution in order to get the United States Army off of their island. And they finally did this in 1901. The Cubans were warned not to incur any indebtedness beyond their means or to do anything that would jeopardize their independence. They had to agree to grant the United States a naval base on the island that eventually became Guantanamo Naval Base. A year later, the Cubans and the United States signed an economic reciprocity treaty that linked the Cuban economy specifically to the United States economy in a subordinate and dependent role. This was done by reducing the Cuban economy to that of an extraction colony. Now, Cuban sugar was given a special low tariff rate that allowed it to prosper and become the dominant industry in Cuba. Now, the Cuban economy became a single cash crop economy that was utterly dependent on the continuation of this special tariff. The United States, the this allowed the United States to flex control over all of Cuba's affairs. Has noted before the United States had organized a rebellion in the Panamanian province of Panama. This rebellion in 1903 led to the facilitation and the construction of the Panama Canal. Um, the United States would go on to enforce treaties on the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Nicaragua. The United States also launched military occupations in these countries intermittently between 1909 and 1934 and exercised financial control on these companies up until 1941. Now, the United States targeted these nations for a very important and very strategic reasons. Panama and Nicaragua, they held the best two routes for an interoceanic canal. Panama, of course, because there was this, it used to be called the Panama Hole in the ground, but there was this great crater in between Panama, and it was first thought of by the Spanish and then the French that they could build a canal, build a canal linking the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean, by having the canal filled with water and simply having ships go back and forth through it. In Nicaragua, there were talks of building a canal to link the Atlantic and the Pacific through Lake Nicaragua. And of course the islands of the Greater Antilles, and Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola. Hispaniola is the island that is home to both Haiti and the Dominican Republic. It was thought that by taking possession of those Greater Antilles Islands, and then also the United States also bought the Virgin Island from Denmark by taking possession of the Danish Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and Cuba. The United States will control the approaches to the two best routes to a transoceanic voyage route. The two best route options will be controlled and protected by those two approaches. So very strategic regions. Another reason those territories were targeted was that they were seen as being very vulnerable to European intervention because of their chronic indebtedness and their instability. Hawaii, Guam, and the Philippines, they were taken from Hawaii was taken from the natives, and Guam and the Philippines were taken from Spain because they were all key resupply stopping points for military and merchant ships at this time, and largely because all transoceanic ships use coal for fuel, and coal had to be resupplied periodically. These islands were coaling stations, and there were also stations where other vital supplies were taking on board. And again, these possessions were all vital stopping points on the route to China and Japan, to that fabled China market. Now, all of this was done to strengthen the United States economy. And speaking of the United States economy, in the 20th century, free trade became became sort of the preferred battle method or national policy enforcement method of the United States. By the early 20th century, the United States was eclipsing Imperial Germany in economic production. The open door policies of the United States made the countries in Latin America and Asia with smaller economies fair game, and the United States exhibited a predatory behavior towards those nations and began to carve out huge areas of influence where the economic strength of the United States was flexed using free trade, and the United States' ability to outproduce all their rivals with better quality and lower cost goods, thus weakening those nations and their ability to sort of fend off the United States trade efforts. Now, free trade was very clearly used as an instrument of imperialism by the Republic. During the interwar years of the 20th century, the United States continued this policy of rejecting membership in the League of Nations. Now, rejecting membership in the League of Nations did not hinder the expansion of the Republic's economy. It did not hinder American diplomacy either, had the United States signed numerous treaties during the interwar years with a number of nations. In the 1920s, the United States economy really undergirded the global economy. And in a way, the peace and stability of that decade of the 1920s was largely the result of American interventionist policies. Now, when the American economy collapsed, with the stock market collapse and the world economy fell to pieces, peace fell apart with it, and it inaugurated what can be described as a mood of isolation, limited to stay out, limited really just to staying out of another European war. This feeling changed as Nazi Germany conquered most of Europe and led to the weakening of those isolationist beliefs. And the United States would emerge from World War II as the most powerful, influential, and wealthiest power in the world, really since Habsburg Spain. Now, part of the reason that the anti-imperial beliefs existed to a fairly large extent and really still exist is because the United States rebelled from a modern great power, Great Britain. Another is that we have defined imperialism. We have defined imperialism as having formal colonies and not viewed having informal colonies as a form of imperialism. We also haven't really viewed what the United States did with the territory that she acquired and carving them up and adding them to the Republic as a way of imperialism. It's simply not viewed that way even now. Free trade was never viewed as a form of imperialism, although it was acknowledged as a tool of state diplomacy. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the question was asked, was the United States an empire? The given belief, the answer, and really the given belief by most Americans was no. A resounding no, backed up by the fact that the promotion of democracy around the world has always been and has always been a stated aim of the Republic. Also, the fact that our security has always been our main goal in our foreign policy agenda. Now, critics to this point out the fact that in defense of security, the United States has created and frequently and consistently uses the world's largest military. The United States military total cost is greater than all the other armed forces of the other contemporary great powers combined, which is a hallmark of imperialism. Having a large army, having a larger and more expensively equipped army is a hallmark of imperialism. Another factor to consider is it imperialistic to promote values that other peoples and cultures do not desire? Another point to consider is that all of the expansion, formal and informal, was a result of fear. Fear-induced a fear-induced need to protect the Republic's security. Now, another question is whether that negates the domination of the United States, whether that negates the domination that the United States exerted in the process of protecting itself. Domination that can clearly be defined as imperialism. While discussing imperialism, the reality of the fact that sovereign states must use imperialism, or at least must view the protection of their sovereignty as their primary motivation, must be taken into account. The motivation to defend one's security is always going to be there for sovereign states. That's sort of the name of the game when it comes to sovereign states. Sovereign states use war and expansion to alleviate the fears of the fears that are generated towards their sovereignty, and they create empires as a result of that. But when the fears are alleviated, national interest and national honor come into play, and they further serve to justify what can be interpreted as aggressive actions. Largely said, you can create an empire based off of fear alone. But when your fears have subsided, when you don't have anything to worry about, and you are left with this empire, there's this new sort of rush to justify what you've done. I call it Conquerors Logic, to where national interest and national honor sort of come into play. National honor being, we have won these wars, we've acquired the territory, we're not going to give it up. We will defend, sustain, and maintain what we have already conquered, and we're looking to gain more because we want to be the best that we can be. And of course, the national interest comes into it, is that as your state acquires more territory, they have access to more resources. So the wealth and the well-being of the nation is now, the nation or the state is now at stake. With the success, with the opening up of that rich agricultural hinterland of the old Northwest and the old Southwest, there was no turning back. Everyone saw this had a great boom. We have free land for free farmers and free land for slave owners. Moving into the plains and so forth, moving into the mining areas of the old Southwest, not even the old Southwest, but the new Southwest and the Great Plains. It was at that point it was just national interest, and I'm sort of rambling now, so I'll cut here. But there are a lot of factors to take in when we discuss isolation and imperialism, and that's my lecture. That's our discussion for this topic. Hit like, subscribe, and comment on it. Let me know what you think about American isolation and imperialism. There are it is a controversial topic. Most people, a lot of people don't really see how the United States wasn't isolationist and how the United States created an empire. Even now, the arguments, even when defined, don't pass muster to some people. So I'm curious to see if there's anybody out there watching the lecture series who feels that way. And as always, I'm Ted. Hit like, subscribe, and comment, and let me know what you thought about this lecture. And I'll see you guys next time.